So this is a story about Skinwalker Ranch. This happened Saturday, October 17th, back in 2015. So it happened how I found out about the place. I got fired from a job I had back then and started transporting campers all over the country with a friend of mine who got me into it. I heard about it through him. And he had always talked about Skinwalker Ranch and about going out there and how crazy it was, and I never really paid much attention until, you know, we both got to being around that area one time, and he asked me, hey, let's go there. I'm like, okay. So we had met up in, let's see, we met up in Fort Duchesne, right there on the crossroads there. There's a Ute Plaza supermarket right on US 40 there. And it's still daytime, so we had drove down the road. Let's see, go about 1.8 miles. I measure it back to this little side road, and then that goes down kind of beside Bottle Hollow, and then down at the it's a southwest corner of Bottle Hollow. There's like a gravel driveway that kind of goes back off into nowhere. 1.7 mile drive down this little gravel driveway, gravel road trail. It goes through a creek bed. My truck bottomed out, I remember that. Let's see. And then that goes all the way back to like a grass clearing, kind of like a little valley, which she told us that's base camp, basically, where he had stayed several times before. And he'd gone out there and stayed, seeing a few things. See, from that point on, where we parked my truck in that grass right here, you go up this little hill and then you're basically under the power lines, which they make some weird noises, some pinging and weird noises. I'll see if I can find that sound clip and add to it also. And then you remember we are decked out in full camouflage, because even though he told me he got permission from the guy's land that we kind of had to go across to get up to the top of this ridge, once we were on the ridge we didn't want to be seen by the security guard down below, so we had to wear camouflage. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Kind of makes it adventurous. So we walked back through this, it's kind of rolling desert terrain, kind of, you got little hills and rock hills and little valleys you're walking through. The hills are probably only about 20-30 feet high at the most. You can just either walk up them and down them or walk around them. And the straight line, I want to say it's about 1.75 miles straight line from where my truck was parked to what he called Werewolf Ridge. This is, if you look on Google Maps, there's the Skinwalker triangle on that gravel driveway. Now the ridge side, just to the north of that, maybe 50 feet, up at the top of there, there's a big rock that you can hide behind and like down inside, and you can overlook the old ranch house, or the new ranch house I should say. We look through the binoculars and you can get a bird's eye view of the ranch and then overlook the whole property and see everything that's going on in the field down below. So we did that. We stayed there for quite a few hours. We watched the security guard drive by when it was just getting dark. It wasn't quite dark yet. He made his, I don't know if it was his final lap, but he drives all the way down to what we called the old homestead, and then turns around and comes back. So we waited for him to do that, and then my friend, who always brings alcohol with him wherever he goes out there, so he started drinking, picked up some vodka from the Ute Travel Plaza there, and about By the time we got to about 9 or 10, I'd say he was probably intoxicated enough where he had started going on about some cave that's on the side of the cliff side there, saying that there's some cave down there that he wants to go in, and he had never mentioned this before, so I'm like, yeah. Not too sure about that. It's dark out, and you're drunk, and you want to descend down the side of this cliff. Yeah, I don't think that's probably a good idea. So, didn't think it was too good of an idea, but he decided to go anyways. So he bails over starts walking over to the side of this cliff. I don't know if you've seen the TV show. It's not just a cliff you walk down. It's probably a good 50 feet up, and it's rocky, it's steep, and it's dark. And we're not using flashlights, so. I remember being down on all fours on my back, scooting down the hill, kicking gravel, dirt. So, once we got down to the bottom, there's a space clearing before the creek. Let's see, the creek parallels the driveway. And then there's probably, I don't know how many feet, 20, 30 feet between the bottom of the cliff before the creek. And then there's, on the other side of the creek, is the driveway. So what we did is we walked from basically on that little clearing parallel to the creek all the way down to the old homestead, which is a barn basically standing on the side. And there's a little wooded, treed-in area across the gravel driveway from that, which at the time I didn't even know there was another house inside there, which was the actual homestead. I thought he was always referring to the barn, and that's what we were checking out, was the barn. As we got up to the barn, there was a few things in the barn yard, I guess you could call it. Looked like an old decaying horse-covered wagon, or a horse-drawn wagon, all rotted, and maybe some little pieces of farm equipment in the ground too. Then, once we started looking inside this barn, we peeked in the door. He went inside. I remember seeing an old little wooden chair in the corner. There was a shelf with a nice little round rock about the size of a golf ball on it. He looked at it, and as soon as he did that, I was standing in the doorway and turned around. I'm like, seeing like a flashlight or something coming down that gravel road. I'm like, dude, there's somebody coming. So we both, quick, ran out the door and ran toward the cliff side, which are some pretty big rocks. Like, I'm talking like 10 feet, like size of like trucks and cars. Rocks up there that we kind of like hid behind. And I got thinking, I'm like, well, you know, that might have been just the porch light to the ranch that we saw. I'm like, because nothing's coming, I don't hear anything. And yeah, it was probably just a porch light. Little did we know at the time, I didn't know at the time either, that the ranch house was 3/4 of a mile away, and it was around the driveway in the cliffside was like a big curve, so you couldn't see through the cliff, and it wasn't the porch light. So we went back to the barn. We were looking around inside there with our flashlights, and he picked up that rock. I remember him being fascinated about that rock, and picked it up, and then just then I turned and looked. I'm like, the light's getting bigger, it's getting closer, it's definitely somebody, the guard's coming. So we ran out, and now we're behind the creek, so we're trapped between the cliffside and the creek. So we had to walk. We kind of walked pretty dang fast towards the light, which I measured it out of that barn. It's about 175 feet to a little bridge that you can cross the creek, which the bridge is just a board, like a 2x12 laying across. It's probably like 3 feet long. You can hear the water rushing underneath. It's probably a few feet drop, but it's pretty dark. So we're walking across this little plank board in the middle of the night, dark, no flashlights. Get across that, get to the gravel road, and you can still see the light. The light is getting bigger. It's getting brighter. It's not flashing. It's kind of like you can see it moving a little bit as if it was in somebody's hand, like it was like a flashlight's flickering just a little bit at the motion of somebody walking. And it was like an old incandescent looking light bulb type flashlight, not a bright white LED one or anything like that. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And wasn't really too alarmed, because it was a good 150 yards away at least, because it was quite a ways away. We got to the gravel road and we started walking away from it. And this was, let's see, we were probably walking at a regular pace because we knew we were at the edge of the ranch and we could get out of there before they could get anywhere near us, because it seemed like it was quite a ways away yet. We got about 50 yards after we walked. We were glancing behind us once in a while, and it was not getting any closer and not getting any farther. So it was staying about between 100 and 150 yards, I would estimate. I know it's probably quite a distance, but it's hard to remember. So at that time, as I was walking away from it, we were both walking in the same direction, obviously. My friend was looking back towards the light, and I remember seeing a shadow of something. It was just a big shadow. I'd say like the size of a refrigerator, or a cow, or a small car, just a big black dark shadow come from the left and stop right in the gravel road in front of us, only about 50 feet in front of us. I stopped dead, and at that time another one moved like it was behind it, dark, and moved to the right, more towards the creek, like 10 feet to the right of it, and stopped. You know, this is really dark, and all we can see, there's starlight out there, and you can see the ground, because the ground gravel is a little lighter, and that's all you could see. Like when you got to the grass and the dark trees, it was just black, so you couldn't see anything. But there was a distinctive two dark shadows, big, that moved in front of us. I stopped, and as I turned around, I'm like, dude, somebody's in front of us, something. I'm like, we had a no light rule, no flashlight rule up to that. Don't turn your flashlights on, because obviously there was a flashlight or a light coming behind us looking for us. And he's like, okay, turn it on. I'm like, turn it on. There is nothing there in front of us. I'm like, okay. Now I turn around, look behind us. The light had made it to the old homestead, and it's now about 20 feet off the ground, hovering in the air, and it's like about behind a branch or two, because there's a trees by that, right by across from the barn, across from the gravel. There's trees there where the actual house is. So this light is 20 feet off the ground, up in and there's a few branches behind it, so it's kind of not in the trees but on the edge of the trees, but there's a few branches in front of it, so you can't clearly see it 100%, but it's about the size of a beach ball, I would estimate, from being 100 yards. We might have been even a little closer, 75 yards, because we had stopped trying to figure out what those shadows were. Once I seen those two shadows, and now that light's about 20 feet up in the air, I just looked at him like, dude, walk. We gotta walk fast. Let's go. We gotta move now. Like, I started panicking a little then. Once you realize that I was boxed in, I kind of freaked out, because I'm like, well, if something shadows in front of us and that light's coming from behind us, now we're boxed in. This is not a good thing. But thankfully the shadows turned out to be nothing, and then we kept walking. We got to this gate in that gravel road. We hopped it. There was a T. I think one of the gravel roads went to the left, and then one went straight parallel with the creek. We just followed that one. Okay, we followed the gravel road back to the main road, which was about 0.68 miles I measured to the road. And the whole time, that light, it followed us, but it stayed the same distance away. I would say about 75 yards, like a half a city block. Kind of bad at guessing measurements, but it was far enough where you could see that it's 20 feet up in the air. It's about beach ball size, and it had turned a little bit more orange than the original light bulb yellow that it was. And it wasn't bright, but it was light enough where you could see it light up the tree branches and stuff. It kind of stayed up and always behind something. Like the gravel road had curves in it, like the whole way. It curved back and forth, and it was every time we'd get to a bend in the road, or the gravel road, it was always on the other side of the bend behind us, so you could see it through the trees, and it was there the whole way. And then once we made it to the road, we just turned right, and then that went down about, let's say, a quarter mile, sharp right hand curve, and then it went back up towards if you kept going that way, you'd hit US 40 again in a couple miles. But we didn't make it that far. We're walking down the road, kind of in relief, because we made it quite a ways, good quarter mile, I'd say, out of the driveway, and it didn't follow us out of that driveway, so no more light. So as we're walking down the road, quarter mile from the gravel driveway that we came out on, you gotta remember we're wearing full camo, backpacks. I think I had my knife on me, and a car is coming, and we just kind of hugged the shoulder, not really caring about a car. Who cares after what we just saw? Cars, at least we're concerned. And it slows down. I can't remember if it drove by. It might have drove by and then came back. And it was a carload of kids. High school kids, probably. I don't know. They were out probably sightseeing. I think that's what they told us they were doing, because they knew the area too. And they asked us if we needed a ride, and we're like, yeah, sure. After that ordeal and hike, and yeah, we'll gladly take a ride. So we jump in the car with them. They all shake our hands, like super polite, like overly polite. It was kind of weird, and they all kind of seemed, in a sense, like starstruck. But I guess if you're out looking for weird stuff and two guys emerge out of the darkness wearing like full camouflage military fatigue stuff, they're probably gonna think that's weird too. So we kind of told them the story. I don't think they believed much of it. They're just kind of quiet and super polite. My buddy told me they were the Mormon kids, so that's why they were so like neat, nice and polite. But I guess that's popular in that area. So they gave us a ride back to that gravel road, and then I think it was another mile and a half, mile and 3/4 back from that gravel road where they dropped us off to where we walked back to my truck in that grass clearing, and we drove out of there, and I went back to the Ute Travel Plaza, slept there that night. So that was the extent of that night. And then we met up with another girl the next day, and she gave us a ride. We actually started on the road. We had somebody drop us off. We knew someone out there, a girl that lives out there, that was on the same Joe Rogan show with my buddy, I think. And we walked up that gravel road. This was like just getting dark, so it's not 100% dark. So we're walking up the gravel driveway, and I wasn't really keen on going back up to the ranch or hopping the fence. We made it to the gate that we jumped when we left Skinwalker Ranch on some other farmer service road. We made it there, and I'm like, I don't really want to go back there, because what we did last night, if it was somebody, whoever it is, they're obviously going to know they're there. So we hung out there for a bit, just checked the area out, turned around and walked back down the gravel road that parallels the creek. We did hear what would, I guess you would sound like a bowling ball being thrown into the creek. That's what, like a whoosh. We heard that. My buddy told me about it. We looked around, we didn't think anything of it. I don't know if it was him that may have threw something, because he's famous for staging fake things. So we walked a little bit more, and it happened again. Big splash sound. And I think he was near in my line of sight, so I don't think he threw something. It could have been something thrown or some noise, but I don't rule out the fact that he could have threw something. It's undetermined, but we made it back to the road, walked back up. We had to walk all the way up the road, this time to the gravel road, and once we got to the gravel road again to walk back to where my truck was parked, well over a mile off the road, we hear some people walking down this gravel road. Now it's dark. This is hours after we left, so we jumped to the side. You know, we're like kind of like hiding, 50 feet off the gravel road, kind of looking to see who's coming. We see a flashlight, and here's a group of kids walking up that gravel road with flashlights, you know, and we can hear them talking about. They start talking about these two guys in camouflage coming out of the woods and something about that. So they were telling the story to their other buddies about the night before when they picked us up. So that was kind of comical. We hid until they walked by and walked back to my truck, and nothing further happened on this visit to the ranch. Do have a good story about some wild horses though, and once I did some more research and I got a lot more theories on the place. But the wild horses story, that'll be my story number 2. That one's pretty crazy. And what do I think I saw during this trip? I don't know. I mean, with technology and time, I mean, someone could have made something to make that light and then float up in the air. I mean, it's not out of the question that, and we didn't stick around or get close enough to it to see anything super out of the ordinary. But the shadows threw me off. I don't know what. I have no idea what that was. That could have been a trick too. Someone could, maybe, I don't know, in the heightened state of anxiety that we were in, maybe it's easier to trick people with stuff. I don't know. But that's my story, and that's all that happened this time. Stay tuned for the next story.